Want to add a little extra oomph into your PNG tubers? Well, I turned this into this. Guilty Gear fans will recognize this pose immediately as the Jack O pose. I knew I wanted to do this pose at some point originally as a live 2D model, but I didn't want to spend 200 plus hours on another live 2D model, mostly because I'm already doing that with my new stream model coming out November. So I'm scrolling through Twitter, avoiding all of my responsibilities as one does. Also go follow me, by the way. And in between cultured anime art, the latest hot takes that hurt my brain, and thirsting over my moots' beautiful faces, I see something called PNGTUBER Plus. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. It looks like an in-between of a live 2D model and a PNG tuber. This will be perfect for testing out concepts, replacing the need for a 3D model in some VR games, and enhancing current PNG tubers, assuming they're cut for it. Speaking of cutting, yes, you will have to cut the model, but I promise you it'll look great. Being able to vary the physics per area will vastly improve how dynamic your PNG tuber will look. Since becoming a live 2D artist and rigger myself, I just tend to set up most of my paintings like this, just in case I want to animate them or turn them into models. If you want to get into this style of art, I highly recommend doing this. This is how the cutting ended up looking for my model here. It's about 31 pieces in total. Keep in mind though that you have to save each and every piece as its own PNG. Oh, and before we get into the setup, this is a 1920 by 1080 300 DPI canvas. If I were to make a brand new model, I would have made this at a 2K or 4K resolution now that I know it can handle a bigger size. You'll see some of the smaller parts of my model get a little pixelated, but it's really hard to see when I'm streaming, so you can just learn from my mistake. Once you get this open, connect the mic you want to use and click on the pencil in the lower right corner. This is the editing mode and where you'll spend the majority of your time in this program. I'm not sure if you can basically select and then delete the pieces of the example model, but go ahead and yeet that out of here. Hitting the escape key opens up the path that your folder needs to be in, so just stick it in there. As of version 1.2.1, you can't just import the entire folder, you do need to click on each PNG one by one and load it in. This was a little annoying, but not my biggest gripe with this program. The pieces will also not load in the same order you keep your drawing in, so just use Q and E to change what the height order is. I set my eye open, eye closed, mouth open, and mouth closed before moving on to the idle animation. For this model, I set up breathing and a slight sway movement, mostly on the upper body. Turn your bounce down to 0 while you're setting up your idle animation. The bounce basically acts as your physics, but we can mess with those settings later. There's two sections for X and Y movement, which work fairly similarly in live 2D, conceptually speaking. The first one is frequency, which is speed, and the second is amplitude, which is power. Once you mess with the settings, it's really easy to get, so don't worry if this doesn't make a lot of sense right now. This is unfortunately where I started to get really frustrated with this program. I really hope the dev implements something other than the slider to change the intervals. Please just let me type in the number or even use arrow keys to click the number. The sliders are really small, and I would have gotten this setup so much faster if I could stop missing the number that I wanted to hit. Also, it took about an hour to rig, which really isn't a lot, but it could have been streamlined and saved a lot of my sanity. Now on to my favorite part of the model, physics. Most of the models I've seen made in this program were chibis, so I didn't really get to see this part of the rigging pushed very far. We've got a few options here: drag, squish, and rotational drag. Drag, from what I could tell, makes it harder to move away from its origin point. You'll have to experiment for what looks best. Squish is the jiggle physics, but I'm sure there's many applications other than plot. For using rotational drag, you'll need to change the origin point of the part, which is super easy. You just press and hold O and use WASD to move at the same time. Then, when you have your bounce turned on, it will move around that point instead of dead center. While you see me rigging this model, I did use rotational drag on the bangs, but I ended up switching it to just drag and squish, since it looked like the hair was detaching from the head a little bit. Solely for comparison purposes, I'm going to show you the same model in VEADOTUBE Mini. This isn't to say that one program is explicitly better than the other. Whichever you choose will depend completely on your wants and needs for your project. This setup took me all of maybe 5 minutes total. 4 versions of the model, again, all PNGs. Mouth open with eyes closed, mouth closed with eyes closed, mouth open with eyes open, and mouth open with eyes closed. You just click the icons, set them with the corresponding images, and boom, you're done. It's just that easy. Now, the downside to this program is that while there are some movements you can choose, they aren't very dynamic and are less adjustable. The only thing that really bothers me about this program is a lack of true transparency option. You have to chroma key your model out, which can mess with how certain colors look or limit the colors that you can use on your model. For instance, I have a transparent part of my heel, and the colors to me look very different in both VEADOTUBE and PNGTUBER Plus. I'm using version 1.4 currently, so if the dev makes any adjustments, that would be the one thing I want to have changed. Let's take a look at this model side by side. For how I envisioned this model, I think PNGTUBER Plus is the better option for me. But let's go over the pros and cons. PNGTUBER Plus. Pros: dynamic movement and full transparency. Cons: slider system, can't import folders, and no autosave. VEADOTUBE Mini. Pros: simple setup and no model cutting. Cons: limited movement and chroma key transparency. If you'd like to see this model live during one of my streams, I stream both on YouTube and on Twitch. All the things you should click will be in the description below. If you have any questions about either program or questions about my art, feel free to leave them in the comments section. Oh, and if you've reached the end, put a camera emoji in the comments to confuse anyone who only watched the first 30 seconds.